All right, I got a question for you. I've been wanting to ask you for like 5 weeks now. Are we ready for the word? Yeah. All right, Genesis chapter 22. Go to Genesis 22. I hope Ed Williams is watching online because Ed loves Genesis 22. He loves it. He loves it. Genesis chapter 22, that's where we're going to be at. I'll give you a second to turn there. Man, I missed you. Like 99% of you look better than when I last saw you, so congratulations. Titus, it looks good. Just kidding. That's true. That's true. Hey, shout out. Can I tell you real quick? Shout out to, I know sports season's getting crazy. Can I tell you, there is not much that I love more than watching people run in after practice. Like, man, hey, I'm just telling you what, I think that's amazing. Like, if you're like, you will distract me in a lot of ways preaching. You will not distract me running in a uniform smelling like feet, right? Like, that's fine. Just come in. Hey, I love. If you got fall sports, man, and you can't be here till 7 o'clock, guess what? It's 7, and we're just about to start preaching. Right, so you don't feel like you're missing the whole night. If you get here at 7, man, we want to see you come. We want to see you be here. And so shout out to you that had fall sports practice just a few minutes ago, and you're here. Shout out to you that didn't have practice. Go non-athletes. Am I right? But I love that. All right, Genesis 22. Are you there? Are you there? Sweet. Genesis 2, verse 1. It says this. It's the word. Let's listen up. Listen up. It's 22, verse 1. After these things, listen up. Here we go. 22 verse 1. After these things, God tested Abraham. And he said to him, Abraham. And Abraham said, Here I am. And he said, Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you. Have you ever had a moment where someone tells you to do something, right? They give you a command, they give you instructions, and you hear what comes out of their mouth, and you're like, ain't no way you just told me to do what I think you just told me to do. Anybody? I had this moment just a few days ago. We took a small team up to the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, in Sunbury City, and we had a fun day where we went to Hershey Park. We rode some roller coasters and stuff, and there was a ride there at Hershey that literally takes you up. And y'all, when I say it's 90 degrees, like it's 90 degrees up. It's so trippy. And I looked at Gray Mabry, and I was like, "Bro, you riding this thing?" And Gray looked at me like I had 12 heads, and he's like, "No, I'm not." Gray, you waited the whole line with us, didn't you? Where you at? Yeah, waited the whole line with us. We got to the end. He just walked right through it. Didn't do it. He's like, but looking at him when I told him that was the command. Like, bro, you don't have a choice. You're riding this. And he looked at me like I was insane. He's like, dude, I am not doing that. Can you imagine what Abraham's response would have been like right here? What the inner kind of first immediate reaction to what he was just told was? I mean, you get that. Can we put up verse 1 again? Can we put that up? Verse 1. Y'all missed me doing this, didn't you? God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. Like, okay, God's speaking to me, sweet. And God says, Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, go to this land and like go on vacation, go on like a retreat, go have some father-son bonding. No. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and offer him there as a burnt offering, sacrifice him, kill him as a burnt offering to one of the mountains, which I shall tell you. If I'm Abraham, I'm like, God, what? Like, God, did you really just tell me what I think you just told me? No, listen, God knows that this is kind of a crazy command, right? Because did you notice? He says, all right, it's already off. Keep it on there for me. Verse 2, he already says, it's your only son, right? So he knows that it's not like God said, Abraham, go sacrifice your son. And Abraham's like, man, I got one that's been annoying the crap out of me. I'm going to take him out. Like, that's not, like, this is Isaac. This is his only son with Sarah. It's his only one, so God knows he's special in that way. And he knows he doesn't have just casual feelings toward him, but he loves him in a way that none of you in this room, except for parents, can understand. He loves him as a child, and God says, I know this sounds crazy, but take your son and offer him up as a sacrifice. And here's why we know it's really, really, really crazy. Can you back to verse 1 real quick? I'm testing you. It's been a long time, I know. I'm putting your fingers into work. It says, after these things. You say, Justin, what do you mean, these things? Does anyone remember the story of how Abraham gets Isaac a little bit? That was not a accident that I had Jake read Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 3, because that's when we first see Abraham on the scene, right? God shows up to Abraham. I've told y'all before, one of the most important passages in the Old Testament, in the whole Bible, is Genesis 12, 1 through 3. And God says, hey, Abraham, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make you a great nation. All these things. You're going to have so many descendants, you can't even count them. Let me ask you, what's really important to have if you're going to have a lot of descendants? You got to have children. It's got to start somewhere, right? Like, you got to have a son that has your name to therefore have descendants. The weird thing about Abraham in Genesis chapter 12 is he doesn't have a son yet. Later on in Genesis 15, when God comes to Abraham and says, hey, Abraham, he reminds him of the promise. Abraham's like, God, I get you're making me this promise, but God, I still don't have a son yet. And Abraham even does this. This is all about after these things, right? And Abraham even does this. He sleeps with his servant to try to have a son with her because God has not given him a son through his wife, Sarah. How messed up is that? You want to know what's even more messed up? Sarah okayed it and encouraged it. Aren't you grateful that God uses like jacked up, messed up, kind of gross people sometimes? Aren't you grateful for that? So he sleeps with his servant. They have a son named Ishmael, but God says, hey, that's great. You had a son. Awesome. Ishmael's story is so cool. But God says, I'm not going to use Ishmael. I'm going to give you a son through your wife, Sarah. So catch this. Abraham is 75 years old in Genesis chapter 12. How old is he when he gets Isaac? Anybody know? Huh? Who is that? 99. Bible scholar, Titus. I hear you. Listen, 24 years. 24 years from the promise of Isaac till he gets to hold Isaac. So some of y'all, what, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old? None of y'all have even been alive for 24 years. And that's how long Abraham had to wait to hold his son. So catch this. It's not just that God is telling him to sacrifice and present Isaac as an offering. It's Abraham's putting an answer to prayer on the offering, isn't he? Abraham is putting the answer to a promise or the beginning of a promise on an altar. So when we read this seems really weird because why would God tell Abraham to do such a thing like this after God has moved so miraculously so that Abraham can even have Isaac in the first place? Have you ever felt like God was leading you to do something kind of weird? That's where Abraham's at right now. And I don't know what's weirder. I don't know what's crazier. What God tells Abraham or how Abraham responds. Because look at verse 3. Look what happens. So Abraham, he rose up early in the morning. He saddled his donkey. And he took 2 of his young men's servants with him and his son Isaac. And he cut wood for the burnt offering. And he rose and he went to the place of which God told him. I don't know what's crazier. That God tells him to do it, or it doesn't seem like Abraham argues at all. Like if I'm Abraham, and I just got that word, and I know everything that God did to bring Isaac into my life. If I'm Abraham and I hear that command, I'm like, God, are you sure? Like, God, do you have the right dude? Like, God, are you sure about this? Did you like misspeak something? But Abraham apparently just wakes up the next morning. Maybe he had some inner turmoil or something, but he wakes up the next morning, gets his son, gets some servants, and they march off to do what God had told him to do. Now here's what I used to think was kind of happening here. Okay? And I'll just be honest, I used to think this. I used to teach this, right? Here's what I used to teach. And I think there may be some truth to this a little bit. In this culture that Abraham is in, child sacrifices were not uncommon, which is really intense. They were not uncommon. I wouldn't say they were the most common thing, but they were not uncommon. And so maybe there's a part of Abraham that's like, okay, maybe I thought this God was different. Maybe I thought this God had a different personality than these other gods of these cultures, but maybe he's a lot like them. And so Abraham went because, man, that's something that gods would sometimes have people do to show loyalty and to show devotion and all these things. That's what I used to teach, and maybe there's still a small part of that there. But I think Hebrews chapter 11 lets us know of the real reason Abraham went. That Hebrews chapter 11 gives us some insight as to why Abraham took his son there. So flip over real quick to Hebrews chapter 11. Did I give you that verse? I hope I did. Chapter 17. It's going to be on the screen if you don't want to flip, if you want to be lazy. But that's fine. Hebrews chapter 11, is it there? Do we have that one? Sweet. Awesome. Listen to what this says. Talk about Abraham. It says, by faith Abraham, when he was tested, he offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son. All right, verse 18. of whom it was said, through Isaac, so through this boy to be sacrificed, shall your offspring be named. Now catch verse 19. This is so good. Abraham considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead. So why did Abraham go and sacrifice? Why was he willing to take his son, saddle up his donkey, get some wood, get a knife, get his servants, and plan to go off? Because it might have seemed crazy, it might have seemed insane, but God said he was going to do a promise through Isaac, and so Abraham has enough faith to say, even if I sacrifice and kill my boy, then God can raise him up again. Is that not crazy faith right there? That's what I like to call, if you're taking notes, I like to call it this. That's resurrection faith. That's resurrection faith. That's faith that says, hey, even if I kill my boy whom God promised me, whom God said I would have, even if I kill him, then the same God that promised him to me is a God that can raise him up from the dead. See, here's what I think we need to understand, and something I think is good. I think sometimes we think that resurrection faith is a New Testament idea. Does that make sense? Like after Jesus rose again from the dead, people started really believing in the resurrection, right? Can I tell you something? Throughout the whole Bible, here we see it in Genesis, we see it in the Psalms. Throughout the whole Bible, people of God were clinging to this faith that there was a reality of resurrection when they died. Go real quick to Psalm chapter 16. Did I give y'all that one? Psalm 16? I think it's verses 9 through 10. I think that's what I gave you. Yeah. Listen to what David says here. He says, therefore my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My flesh dwells secure. Why? Verse 10. For you will not abandon, for God will not abandon my soul to Sheol. That's another word for hell, right? To just the grave. Or you will not let your Holy One see corruption. David is preaching with resurrection faith right here. He's saying, look, because I have faith in God, but because I've given my life to the Lord, because I believe and trust in him, even if I die, I can rest secure because my body will not stay in the grave, but I'm going to be raised to life again. Does that make sense? So resurrection faith is not just something that happens when Jesus comes and Jesus lives and dies and is born again. Resurrection faith is something David displayed, and here it's something Abraham is displaying, because he says, even if I kill my boy, God can raise him up from the dead. How many of you know that resurrection faith is something we should have? You agree with that? We should work on y'all talking back to me a little bit this year. Can we work on that? Does that freak y'all out? Reed, you don't seem like the talk back kind of guy. So the fact that you just said yes makes me very excited. Right? I bet Reed has a great amen voice. Can you give it to me? Oh, yeah, it's a good one. He's got it, right? Listen, resurrection faith is something we should have. But here's what you need to know. I need to warn you. How many of y'all, first off, how many believe resurrection faith is what we should have? Yeah, faith that God can raise us up from the dead. Here's good. I need to give you a warning. Okay? So something you should have. Something I don't want no weak faith. You with me? I don't want no weak faith. I don't want a faith that's like flimsy. I want that resurrection faith. But here's what I need to warn you about. Resurrection faith will make you do some audacious things. You have resurrection faith. That will make you do some bold things, won't it? Can I tell you what I'm praying for you in this school year? What I'm praying for you seniors as you go off to school. Can I tell you this? Listen, if you really have that resurrection faith, that faith that says, man, I believe in a God. And just think about this. If Abraham had resurrection faith before Jesus, how much more should we have resurrection faith looking back and knowing the tomb is empty? You with me? If Abraham and David had resurrection faith that God was going to raise them up on the last day, how much more should we who believe and trust in a Savior who died, laid death in his grave when he got up again? We should have resurrection faith. So here's what you need to know. If you have resurrection faith, that will make you do some bold things. But here's the good news. Ready? If death can't beat you, then who cares what someone says about you? If faith makes you stand up and step out on your team, in your class, in your clubs, and maybe someone says something to you, if even death cannot beat you, then bring on what someone's got to say. But bring on what someone's got to do. Death cannot touch me because I have resurrection faith, not because of my own doing, but because I believe in a Savior who beat death. Abraham has this resurrection faith. I love what he said there. I don't know if y'all caught that. Can we put verse 5 back up again? Or verse 4 and 5. He's about to display this so well. Look at what he says. Verse 4 and 5. I think this is so good. On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he saw the place from afar. And this is so great. You ready? Then Abraham said to his own men, to the servants, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. So God says, sacrifice your son. What does Abraham say? Hey, me and Isaac, we're going to go worship, and me and Isaac, we're coming back. Is that not crazy faith? And Hebrews 11 says that he believed God was going to raise him up from the dead. So Abraham says, we're coming back. I want us, and I'm praying for us over the next few weeks, that this resurrection faith would take root in our heart. So look at what happens in verse 6. It says, and Abraham, displaying this crazy faith, resurrection faith, took the wood of the burnt offering, and he laid it on Isaac, his son. What a savage mood that, He's about to sacrifice Isaac, and he don't even carry the wood for him. No one else thinks that's just incredibly savage. Like Abraham, bro, least he can do is carry the wood, dude. You know what I'm saying? I think that's funny. So he makes Isaac carry the wood. What it says. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they both went of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. He said, here I am, my son. And Isaac said, behold, the fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, he doesn't say that, but Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went, both of them, together. I think oftentimes, how many of y'all know this story? You know the story? You remember this story? I think oftentimes when we hear this story, tell me if I'm right or wrong, we put ourselves in the shoes of Abraham a lot, don't we? I think we kind of do. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe your experience is different. But we talk about the faith that takes, all that stuff. This verse is crazy because we're never told Isaac's age, but we get a note here. Abraham's not taking his boy as an infant to this altar. He's not taking his boy as some toddler who doesn't really understand what's going on, doesn't really get what's happening. Isaac is apparently with it enough. I mean, you can just imagine, right? Can you imagine when Abraham knocked on his room that night and said, hey, man, we're going to get on a journey together. We're going to take a trip tomorrow. We're going to go worship with one another. How many of you are just excited to take trips with your dad, right? I mean, how awesome is that, right? Man, me and Dad, it's gonna be, he got his snacks. He got whatever he got for a 3-day car ride. You know what I'm saying? Donkey ride, whatever, right? They wake up next morning. They have all they need. They got wood, they got knife, they got all that stuff, but they don't have a lamb. And I bet Isaac was like, well, I guess we'll just get one along the way, right? Like, we'll stop someplace, we'll buy one. Like, it's kind of weird, but whatever. I wonder what it was like, and we get an insight of it here. When they get to this place, they've passed all this known civilization, and Abraham looks at the servant and says, y'all go, y'all stay here, we are going ahead. I wonder how many steps it was before Isaac could stop running from the question. His curiosity got the best of him. And he's like, Dad, I got a question. I see we got wood. I see we got fire. It's up to make a fire. I see we got knife. We got all the essentials except for the most important thing. We don't have a lamb. You see, two people's faith is kind of being tested in this moment, isn't it? Abraham's faith is being tested in a major way, but Isaac's is as well. And it's been a minute, I know, since I've been preaching with you guys. I've missed it so much. What are 3 things we talk about to do when we read the Bible? What are 3 tips? Read slow. Let's go. Yeah, picture it. Yeah. Read slow. Ask questions. Picture it. Can we just read this next part slow and just picture this and feel how crazy this moment was? Because Isaac's questioning. Abraham says there's a sacrifice that God has. God's going to provide. But verse 9. When they came to the place which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there. And he laid the wood, just log on log on log. He makes a pile, right? He laid the wood in order. And he bound up Isaac, his son. And he laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. Can we just, like, I don't know, and I hope I'm not reading too much into this, but can you just imagine when Abraham gets to the spot? Can I tell you what I would have done? Like, if I would have had enough faith to get there, which I'm just going to be straight up, like, I probably wouldn't. Like, I get told to do that to Rocky, I ain't doing it. I'm just being honest with you. But just for sake of example, if I have enough faith to get to the spot, and I brought Isaac, brought all that stuff, and I get there, if I'm Abraham and I get to the spot God told me, I'm going to get there, and before I start laying any wood, you know what I'm going to do? I'm like, God, have I proved myself enough yet? Like, God, by faith, I walked here for 3 days. But by faith, I got all this. God, am I good? And you don't hear any words. So I start taking wood, and I'm stacking it. And with every single piece of wood I'm stacking up, I'm like, God, I'm doing it. Like, God, I'm building this. God, if you want to speak up right now, it would be a great time to tell me to stop doing it. I'm proving myself. Yo, listen. What was it like when he bound up his son? I find that so interesting because we don't know. Did Isaac try to fight? We don't know. Did Isaac try to run? Did he try to swim? We don't know. But Abraham, what was it like as he's tying the rope around his son's hands, y'all? Wondering, maybe pleading, God, because we know he has great faith, and that's amazing because he believed that God could raise him from the dead. But I bet you he does not want to kill his son. Would you agree with me on that? And I wonder what it's like when he laid him on the altar, he got his hand on the knife, and he's like, God, any moment now. And I wonder how many of you are in an any moment now moment of your life. Where, man, you're following God faithfully as best you can. You're walking by faith. You're trying to follow him, but yet life has not gotten any better. Seems like God has brought you into worse situations, not better situations. You're trying to follow him, and maybe you're right there just like Abraham in a different situation. But you're like, God, if you could move now, and if you could give me more direction, and God, if you could give me a new word, God, that would be amazing because I'm not really sure where this is going. Have you ever been in a moment like that in your life? I think that's where Abraham is. Yet when he has his hand on the knife, we don't know if he had it just here, if it was raised. We don't know, but look at what verse 11 says. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. Now when it says twice, his name there, that means there's some urgency. Right? So how many of y'all, in your mind, have you seen like little kid pictures of this story where like Abraham has the knife raised? I actually think, this might be totally wrong. I might get to heaven, ask Abraham, come find me, and we'll talk about it, right? I actually think that's probably a pretty good picture. Because listen, when he says his name twice, there's some urgency to this moment. Like there's some urgency where he's like, hey, don't do what you're about to do. Can you imagine what Abraham said? Like, let's just pretend the knife was raised. Gets here, Abraham, oh, thank God. Right? Praise the Lord. He says, Abraham, Abraham, look what verse 11 says. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, he said, here I am. And listen to this. Do not lay your hand on the boy. Don't do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing that you withheld your son. You have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. We know from Hebrews 11, Abraham is being tested. And God says, Abraham, I see your faith. Can I tell you what I love? I love that Abraham has a faith that holds literally nothing back from God, even his family. Can I tell you what happens a lot of times? And this might flop because I was not planning on saying this. I think sometimes we have a faith, like let's just, this illustration might just suck because I literally just talked about this. I think we have a faith where sometimes, give me something. Can I borrow your Bible? Okay. This was not planned. Where like, this is all my stuff. Right? This is all my stuff. Anna Luke's Bible. It's all my stuff. I think sometimes here's how we live. Can y'all see this? Do I need to stay on the stage? Can you see this? It's just my stuff, right? I got my Bible, Luke's Bible. I got my chord charts, got my iPad, got all this stuff, got whatever. I think sometimes how we do faith is this, ready? God, I'll give you this. I got this. You hear me? God, I'll give you this, but this I'm good with. I'm going to control this. I'm gonna make my best. I got this. And maybe sometimes we give him something, but then we go back and we're like, yeah, I'm gonna take that back. You know what I love? When it came to Abraham, you know what Abraham said? He said, whatever I have, whatever I got, even if it's the son that God has promised, God said in his word that Abraham did not withhold anything, even his son. I tell you what, I'm making a sermon outline in my head that I wasn't even planning on. I want to have a resurrection type faith, and I want to have a faith that holds nothing back. I want to have the kind of faith where it says, God, I trust you with my family. I want to have a faith that says, God, I trust you with my school year. I want to have a faith that says, God, I trust you with my college. I want to have a faith that says, God, whatever you want in my life, it's on the table for you, and I don't want to hold anything back. That's the kind of faith that Abraham has here. Is that not a crazy kind of faith? Oh, that's an incredible kind of faith, that he withholds nothing from his heavenly Father, but he gives him everything. And God says, I've seen your faith, and I know that you fear God. Now, here's something I had to wrestle with. Okay? Here's something I had to wrestle with. Can I teach you a fancy church word? It's not too fancy. You got this. The word omniscient. 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 You might know what omniscient means? Above all, kinda, all-knowing. Omniscient, knowing. Omniscient. He's all-knowing. So let me ask you this. Ready? What's right here? Did God have to learn something about Abraham? No, right? Like if God is omniscient, then we have to say that God knows everything. That God knows everything about the world. God knows more than Google. God knows more than like whatever you can think of. God, this was crazy. Can I tell you this real quick? I miss being your youth pastor. Listen, God knows more about you than you know about yourself. So listen, we probably then, I miss being with y'all so much. We probably then should kind of just screw the culture of our world that's saying like, just discover yourself, man. Or just kind of mess around, do whatever. Discover who you are. When listen to me, everybody right here, because some of you are in chains because of this, because you're trying to do all this self-discovery and you're exhausted and you're running out. Where really we should say, God, I want to get to know you, because when we get to know God, we get to know the God who knows everything about me, who knows more about me than I know about myself. So the more I get to know about God, actually, the better I understand who I am. Do you hear me? He's all-knowing. He knows that. So Abraham. It's not that God needs to learn something about Abraham. That's not it. And now I know he says that now I know, right? But can I tell you what? And we can talk about this if you have a question about this. I think God is just saying that so he can kind of understand, right? Just kind of helps Abraham get a handle on this test that just happened, right? But God already knows what Abraham has in him. So here's what I think is important about this passage. If it's not God that needs to learn something about Abraham, then are you ready? Listen. It's Abraham that needs to learn something about God. Yo, when I was in Starbucks studying the sermon, I about got up and started preaching to everybody. When I thought of that, because it's not God that needs to learn something about him. Why? Because God is omniscient. He's all-knowing. He knows everything. It's not God that needs to learn something about him. Abraham needs to learn something about God. Can I just tell you, everybody right here, listening, what if whatever you are going through right now that does not make sense, that you don't understand, that you can't fathom, that you can't put your hands on. What if in that moment God has something for you to learn about him that you could not learn otherwise? What if in that moment, I'm going to say something really crazy right here, and I know because I know a lot of you are doing some really sucky and really hard things. But listen, what if God in his grace and in his love for you wants you to learn something about him that you could not learn if life was rosy? You could not learn if there was no testing. You could not learn if maybe it was different. And I know that's hard because I know some of you are dealing with some crazy crap right now, and I get that. But what if God is saying, hey, I don't need to learn anything about you because he knows you, he knows who you are, knows every detail about you. But he says, you need to learn something about me. Can I tell you what I thought about this? I knew what Psalm 34:18 said. that it said the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. But can I tell you when I really knew that? When my heart got broken a couple times. Like I knew that intellectually, that God was close to the brokenhearted. But until my heart got broken, from anything, listen, just be real, from anything as small as like being broken up with in high school to anything as big as getting to where my dad had cancer, like whatever, grandparents passing away, anywhere on the spectrum, until I started dealing with those things, I did not know the truth of that. I knew intellectually that God in Psalm 23 says he's my shepherd, but I didn't know the reality of that until I walked through some really dark days. I knew that God was my healer, and I knew that intellectually, but until I got friends and family that started being sick, and God delivered them or is delivering them, I did not know that to the fullest extent. I'm just saying, students, that maybe sometimes in life, God is allowing you to undergo a season, and it might seem crazy. You might not be able to explain it. You might be like Abraham, walking and wondering, why am I doing this? You might be laying on that altar wondering, God, do you not see me walking by faith? And yet in that season, in that moment, God is trying to teach you something about himself that you could not learn otherwise. And here, Abraham is about to teach us what he learns about God, and I think this is awesome. Are you ready? So good. What verse 13 says? And Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he looked. And behold, behind him was a ram. It was caught in the thicket by his horns. That ram just shows up, y'all. Like, I don't know where it came from, but it's just there. And Abraham went, and he took the ram, and instead of Isaac on the altar, he offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So look what Abraham does. Oh, it's so good. So Abraham called the name of that place. Now, can I tell you what it is in Hebrew first? He calls the name of that place Jehovah, what? You know the word? Jireh. Which means that this place the Lord will provide. And as it is said to this day, on that mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Abraham calls this place. Man, I was wondering what was going on. I was questioning, and I had faith, but I don't know how real it was. I just had this faith. But after God provided the ram, he renames this place Jehovah Jireh, because it's there that God provides a sacrifice for his son. Instead of his son dying, God provides a sacrifice. Now, this is great that God provides a sacrifice here, and it's a sacrifice of a ram. But how many of you know that God will later offer a sacrifice of his own son? That here, don't you love that God is not asking to do, oh, this is good. This just popped in my head. I hope this is good. Oh, man, think how cool this is. I miss preaching y'all so much. Isn't it cool? God will never ask you to do something that he would not be willing to do. You hear me? Yeah, you're like, Justin, it's too hard. Jesus lived. He's our great high priest who's been tempted in every single way that we've been, except he has not sinned. Right? Hebrews says that. So listen. Jesus is not asking you anything to do that he's not himself done. He told us to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him. What did Jesus do? He denied himself, and he took up his cross. Then I ask you, so isn't this crazy? God is not asking Abraham to do anything that he wouldn't do. He says, Abraham, sacrifice your son. Abraham, build the altar. Abraham, take the knife. And yet, when it gets to that moment, God says, you don't got to do that, because down the road, 2,000 years or so in the future, I'm going to sacrifice my son. So, Abraham, you do not have to sacrifice yours. Oh, that's cool. That God says, Abraham, I'm not asking you to do anything I'm not doing, but when you get to that moment, you don't have to, because later on, I'm going to provide that perfect sacrifice. I love, Luke was wearing this shirt the other day, and I love this quote. Did you realize, Jonathan Edwards says this, you contribute nothing to your salvation except the sin that made it necessary. Listen right here, everybody right here, everybody right here. If you're talking, look at right here. You contribute nothing to your salvation except the sin that made it necessary. Does that make sense? It ain't your good works. It ain't you got potential. It ain't you like somewhat athletic and you probably think you're more athletic than you actually are. It ain't that. It ain't you look decent. Like, you contribute nothing to your salvation except the sin that made it necessary, because it was on the cross that God knew you could not offer anything, so he provides you with everything. When God knew that you could bring nothing to the table, he provides his son for you. Here we learn that God is Jehovah Jireh. He's a provider, and he provides a sacrifice for his people. Is that not good news tonight? Oh, that's good news. And here's what I love. If we kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the rest of the Bible, we learn that God is not just the provider of a sacrifice. He's the provider of a lot of other things, isn't he? Lean in and listen to me real quick. He's Jehovah Jireh because he provides peace. John 14:27 says, Jesus says this. He says, peace I leave you, my peace I give you. And catch this. Peace the world can't give you. Can I talk to you real quick? Can I just lovingly share this with you real quick? The reason some of you are exhausted and you're anxious and you're freaking out all the time is because you're looking for the peace that the world gives you, and that's nothing compared to the peace that Jesus can give you. And you're anxious because you're looking in the world and you're trying to find it, and Jesus is like, hey, I got a better option. He's Jehovah Jireh. He gives us peace. He's Jehovah Jireh. He provides for every need we have. Go read Matthew chapter 6, and he says, look, I dress, the flowers of the field clothe the grass. The birds of the sky have food. If I do that for birds and I do that for grass, how much more will I care for my children? The clothes on your back, that's great if you think you bought them, or that's great if you think your mom and dad bought them, but listen here, you don't have them without his good grace in your life. He meets our needs. He's Jehovah Jireh. He's Jehovah Jireh for our strength. I love what Isaiah says. It says that they who wait on the Lord, he shall renew their strength. See, we think we get strong by working out. We think we get strong by just gritting down and do it. Biblical strength says, God, I'm going to wait on you. I'm going to trust in you. I'm going to wait on you. And he's Jehovah Jireh. He provides that. Catch this. He's Jehovah Jireh because he provides life to us. 2 weeks ago, I got to preach at a camp in Myrtle Beach, and I re-preached through Daniel when we went through camp with that a few years ago. And I was reminded of the power in Daniel chapter 5, where Daniel speaks to King Belshazzar. And catch this. Everybody listen up to this. Listen how intense is this. He says, Belshazzar, you have not honored the God who holds your life breath in his hand. Listen, count of 3. Breathe real quick. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out. Okay, ready? According to Daniel 5, your God held that breath in his hand and just allowed you to take it. That's heavy, isn't it? Some of us are squandering and we're wasting the breaths that he's given us. And yet by his grace, he lets you keep breathing. I'd have given up on you a long time ago. And yet by his grace, he's letting you keep breathing. He's Jehovah Jireh, provides life. Finally, he's Jehovah Jireh. He provides his presence. Isn't it awesome that Jesus says that he has to go? You ever thought about why did Jesus just stay on earth all the time? You ever thought about that? Like, dude, you're God, just stay. Just stay with us. And Jesus says, no, it's good that I go so that I can send the helper. I can send the Holy Spirit to live inside of us. He sends his presence. We could keep going. He provides love and mercy, faithfulness, all these things. But Jehovah Jireh is who he is. He is a provider. Here's what I love. Here's what I love. Students, I want you to know this. As you go into this school year, as you go maybe into new zip codes, right? New classes, new friend group, whatever. Listen. Wherever you place your foot, this is so cool. You ready? Child of God, wherever you place your foot, then his presence never leaves you nor forsake you. So where you go, God is with you. Does that make sense? Where you go, he's with you. And I love how Abraham names the place Jehovah Jireh because God was there. God is a provider. That's who he is. So when you get to Boone, when you get to UNC Charlotte, when you get to, where are you going to stay? Here? When you get to Charlotte, when you get to Porter Ridge this week, when you get to UA this week, when you get to Metrolina next week, when you step on a football field, when you get anywhere when you walk there, child of God, Jehovah Jireh is there with you. So listen, my heart just hurts for some of us because some of us are so exhausted. And maybe we don't even know we're exhausted yet because we're trying to provide so much for ourselves. When you realize, can I just be super youth pastor? Can I do that? When you realize that you suck at providing for yourself and you begin to trust and lean into Jesus, oh my gosh, y'all, the freedom that brings is incredible. Can I get a witness from in the room who's been there? The freedom that brings is like nothing the world can give. I'm praying that some of us tonight will learn the lesson that Abraham learned on that mountain. That our God is a God who provides.